Here we go. Welcome to the Great Relearning. I am Dr. Rob Williams, the host of the Great Relearning podcast. Special thanks to the Marian Institute for supporting this podcast and this conversation. And as you can see from the screen, we are incredibly excited to jump right in with Anne Baring. She is the author of The Dream of the Cosmos, A Quest for the Soul. And we're going to do something a little unorthodox here. We're going to flow right into Anne's presentation about her book and her findings, and then we'll have some conversation after this presentation. Just as a reminder, our conversation here at the Great Relearning really focuses on three big questions. Team Human, who are we? Number one. Where have we been? Number two. And where might Team Human, Homo sapiens, where might we be going? And welcome to the Great Relearning.
Thank you so much, Rob. Lovely to be here with you.
Oh, it's so great to have you. Without further ado, please take us on a journey.
Okay, so this is a long journey. It's covered in my book, The Dream of the Cosmos, but this is a summary of it divided into 5 cosmologies that have had a profound effect on our civilization. So the first one is the cosmology of the lunar era of the Great Mother. This was a cosmology of profound connection and relationship. To understand something that was lost millennia ago, we need to go back to the Neolithic era when the cosmos was imagined as a mother from whose womb all forms of life emerged in a continuous cycle of birth, death, and regeneration. What we now call cosmos and nature was a living web of relationships ensouled by the Great Mother. Life was an organic, living, and sacred whole, and we were part of that whole. The Milky Way was the starry passage by which souls entered and left this world, and the shamanic journey into other dimensions of reality was the spiritual experience throughout this era. The most important idea about this time is that there was no creator beyond creation, no separation between the Great Mother as source or womb and the myriad forms of her life. No separation, therefore, between spirit and nature. Everything was infused with divinity, because each and all were part of a sacred cosmic order, the web of life of the Great Mother. Now, the cosmology of the lunar era was focused on a cyclical process of birth, death, and regeneration that arose from the age-old observation of the recurring phases of the moon, its birth as a crescent, its waxing to fullness, and its waning into the 3 days of darkness. Out of that darkness, the crescent was continually reborn. So light and darkness, life and death were not polarized, but were 2 phases of a total cycle, always leading to regeneration and a new cycle. Woman was revered because, like nature, the Great Mother, she was the carrier of new life. Through an expanded consciousness assisted by psychedelic plants, people in the lunar era saw their lives as part of a great cosmic cycle of birth, death, and renewal, and knew through shamanic experience that although the body died, their soul would take another form in a new life. We can follow the transition from the Great Mother of the Neolithic era to the great goddesses of the Bronze Age, but goddesses such as Isis in Egypt, Inanna in Sumer, and Artemis of Ephesus, all of whom were worshipped as the Queen of Heaven and associated with the moon. For many thousands of years, the Great Mother and these great goddesses personified the principle of relationship, the interconnectedness of every aspect of life, and above all, the sacredness of the great web of life. The sacred marriage of goddess and god was the greatest ceremony of the year in Egypt and Sumer, holding heaven and earth and the feminine and masculine archetypes in relation to each other. And the primary question of this era was, how should the human community act to be in harmony with the life of the cosmos? Out of this question came the laws that govern society and the mathematical laws that governed the cosmos. Plato, in his Timaeus, was the first to give a name to an all-embracing cosmic entity, which he described as a single living creature that encompasses all the living creatures that are within it. He called it the soul of the cosmos, The priceless insight of this era was the understanding that the cosmos has an inner life, a soul, and that this cosmic soul is the origin or ground of our own individual soul, our consciousness. The cosmology of the lunar era begins to fade after the pre-Socratic philosophers and that statement by Plato. Then we come to the second cosmology of the solar era, which has lasted for over 4,000 years, from 2500 BCE to the present day. It was radically different from that of the lunar era. It was a cosmology of separation, characterized by dissociation, duality, fragmentation, and polarization, which resulted from the separation of nature from spirit. That was the root of everything. In the course of it, we lost the ancient participatory consciousness that we had in the lunar era, and the sense that we lived within a sacred order. This consciousness has only survived to our time in the indigenous cultures. The focus of this whole era is on the gradual emergence of the outstanding individual from the collective life of the tribe, and the development of what today we call our conscious rational mind. Civilization was entirely the creation of outstanding men right the way through this era. But this era is also about a violent and traumatic separation from the deeper matrix of the soul or psyche, and a severance of our relationship with nature and the earth. The drive for territorial conquest, power, and dominance, led by warrior kings, nation states, and a series of great empires, replaced the older lunar emphasis on relationship with a harmonious cosmic order, a relationship that was celebrated in the ceremony of the sacred marriage. During the solar era, the sun replaced the moon as the primary celestial body. Between the lunar and the solar eras, there was a time when goddesses and gods peopled the heavens and, as described in the Iliad and the Odyssey, interacted with humans. Ultimately, however, in the three patriarchal religions, the Great Father replaced the Great Mother as the sole image of deity. Because of this, Western civilization developed on the foundation of a fundamental dissociation between spirit and nature, between creator and creation, and between the masculine and feminine archetypes. The sacred marriage was no longer celebrated. This dissociation effectively destroyed the ancient shamanic understanding of the presence of spirit in the material world and opened the way to its exploitation. Two immensely powerful and polarizing cosmologies became the major influence on the social, political, and religious history of Western civilization. The first of these was the battle between light and darkness, good and evil, order and chaos, a battle that we're still engaged in. This polarizing cosmology, projected into the world and acted out there, led to a succession of wars, conquests, and the creation of vast empires, lasting until the present time. Ultimately, it would lead to the battle to conquer and subjugate nature in the service of man. The feminine archetype associated with the goddess and with nature was split off from transcendent spirit, so nature and the earth were no longer sacred. Man was identified with spirit, light, and order, and woman with nature, darkness, and chaos. Man assumed a position of dominance over nature and woman's voice was silenced for 4,000 years until very recently. Her sole value consisted in her being the carrier of man's seed. And if you want an example of today that still exists, you have to look at the Taliban in Afghanistan, who are treating women in exactly the same way as they did 4,000 years ago. The key theme of the solar era is ascent to the light and repudiation of the darkness associated with nature. The development of the conscious mind, together with its stupendous cultural creations and scientific discoveries, can be recognized as the evolutionary achievement of the solar era. But this achievement gradually opened a chasm between spirit associated with mind and nature associated with the body and matter. So you have these two divisions, two separate parts. The whole process was closely tied into the invention of writing and the power that literacy gave to an elite group of very powerful rulers and priesthoods. Our former relationship with nature was gradually weakened as the image of deity changed from Great Mother to Great Father. The loss of the Great Mother and the goddess came in stages in different areas, but a second polarizing cosmology accelerated their demise. And this was, number 3, the myth of the fall of man, described in Genesis 2 and 3. For 2.5 millennia, this myth has been interpreted as divine revelation. An enormous change in Hebrew cosmology took place in 623 BCE, when monotheism was established in Judaism by a group of very clever priests called Deuteronomists. The Jewish people once worshipped both a goddess and a god, a queen and a king of heaven, who together created the world. The Queen of Heaven was worshipped as the Holy Spirit and divine wisdom, and as the tree of life, a cosmic tree connecting the invisible and visible worlds, whose fruit was the gift of immortality. The Deuteronomists eradicated all trace of the goddess Asherah, the Queen of Heaven, removing her statue from the temple, cutting down her sacred groves, and smashing all images of her. Then, very cleverly, they created the myth of the fall, downgrading the goddess into the human figure of Eve, and bestowing on Eve the former title of the goddess, Mother of all living. Cheeky buggers. In this way, the divine feminine aspect of the Godhead was excised from Judaism, leaving Yahweh as the sole creator God. Christianity adopted this image of God from Judaism, as well as the myth of the fall. In 325 CE, the Council of Nicaea named Jesus as the celibate only Son of God, whose sacrificial death had ensured the salvation of Christians. Not everyone, but Christians. The loss of the goddess was the primary reason that we lost our relationship with nature, because in ancient civilizations, the goddess had personified nature for thousands of years. In this new patriarchal cosmology, the image of deity is the transcendent Great Father. Divine immanence is lost. Earth is designated a place of exile and punishment for primordial sin by a vindictive God. It is no longer sacred. Adam is given dominion over the animals, but he is no longer part of the divine order. He is exiled to a world contaminated by the fall and subject to sin, suffering, and death, all of which were introduced into the world by Eve. From the perspective of our relationship with the earth, this cosmology of separation has been a catastrophe, leading to interminable conflicts. Nature, split off from spirit, was effectively de-souled, and we lost the sense of harmonious relationship with the cosmos and the awareness that spirit was present within the life around us. We lost the sense of living within a sacred order. It imprinted us with a negative image of our presence on the planet and placed a heavy burden of guilt and shame, particularly sexual shame, on our shoulders. Since Eve was the prime agent of the fall, she was to blame for our banishment from the Garden of Eden, and this led to the unrelenting persecution of women, reinforcing the misogyny characteristic of this whole era. So if we want to understand the roots of our present environmental and spiritual crisis, we can find them in the loss of 3 important elements during the solar era: the divine feminine image of spirit, the direct shamanic path of communion with spirit, and the sacred marriage of the masculine and feminine aspects of the divine ground. The theme of the lost feminine value weaves like a golden thread through the mythology, poetry, and literature of Western civilization, waiting for the time when the dissociation between spirit and nature can be healed. Now we come to the 4th cosmology, which is the cosmology of Kabbalah. And it's the only cosmology in the West which retained the image of the divine feminine in the Godhead. Extraordinary that this happened. It was retained. Kabbalah is the mystical tradition of Judaism, known as the voice of the dove and the jewels of the heavenly bride. Its origins are obscure, but I believe its cosmology may have originated in that first temple in Jerusalem before it was taken over by the Deuteronomists. And then it went into the Essene tradition and ultimately to Jesus and Mary Magdalene, who were trying to bring it back. I can't say more of this now. But one of the most important images of Kabbalah is the tree of life that was associated with the goddess Asherah before the takeover. The tree of life is a clear and wonderful concept which describes the web of relationships which connect invisible spirit with the fabric of life in this world. The branches of the inverted tree of life extend through multiple invisible worlds or dimensions until they manifest as our world, right down at the bottom there. At the innermost level or dimension of reality is the unmanifest and the unknowable ground, and at the outermost, the forms that we call nature, body, and matter. In this cosmology, every aspect of creation, both visible and invisible, is interwoven with every other aspect. All is one life, one cosmic symphony, one integrated whole. And we participate at this material level of creation in the divine life which informs all levels of reality. So our human lives are inseparable from the inner life of the cosmos. The great maxim of the Kabbalists was, as above, so below, a maxim that originated in the Hermetic science that was once taught in the temples of Egypt. The aim of the Kabbalist was and is to unite the two worlds, the invisible divine world with the world of our experience. Quintessentially, there is only one divine life. There is therefore no duality. The fundamental teaching of Kabbalah is the doctrine of emanation, and because of this, the oneness or unity of all these cosmic dimensions of reality. Divine creative spirit, named as the unmanifest Godhead, Ein Sof, meaning the limitless light, is regarded as totally transcendent and unknowable, but also through emanation present in every particle of the created world, as well as in the intermediary dimensions of reality that are veiled from our sight. So we are all participants in the life of the cosmos, atoms in the being and body of God. The teaching of Kabbalah did not reject this world as fallen, like Christianity did, but saw it sustained and permeated by the light of the divine ground. It taught that whatever we do in this world affects the invisible worlds and vice versa, because everything is connected through that indissoluble web of life. The concept of reincarnation is intrinsic to this path to God. The soul becomes enlightened over many lives, at first through attraction to, then contemplation of, and finally communion with the invisible worlds. Kabbalah is the only cosmology in the West that celebrates the indissoluble union between the feminine and masculine aspects of the Godhead. It preserved the ancient Bronze Age image of the sacred marriage, carried in the union of the divine Father-Mother in the ground of being, who are one in their ground, one in their emanation, one in their ecstatic and continuous act of creation through all the dimensions they bring into being and sustain. No other tradition offers the same breathtaking vision in such exquisite poetic imagery of the union of male and female energies in the one that is both. In this cosmology, the Shekhinah, or feminine face of the Godhead, is the co-creator of the world. She is named as divine wisdom and the Holy Spirit, just as the goddess was in ancient times, and also as cosmic womb, architect of worlds, source or foundation of our world, and the radiance, word, or glory of the unknowable ground or Godhead. Text after text uses sexual imagery and the imagery of light, of an unimaginable luminosity and translucence, to describe how the ray emanating from the unknowable ground penetrates the womb, the great sea of light or sea of glory of the celestial mother. From here it emanates as a radiant cascade, a fountain of living water, pouring forth light to create, permeate, and sustain all the worlds or dimensions that it brings into being. This cascade of light flows through two branches of the tree of life into the 10 female and male vessels, powers, or attributes of the divine, named as the Sephiroth. A third branch descends directly down the center, unifying and collecting the energies on either side. The last 10th sphere of creation is called Malkuth, the kingdom, where the divine mother-father image is expressed as the female and male of all species. Nature is seen as the garment of God. All life on earth, all levels and degrees of cosmic reality are the creation of this primal fountain of light and are therefore an expression of divinity. In the radiance of that invisible cosmic sea of light, everything is connected to everything else as through a luminous circulatory system. Kabbalah gives us a highly developed cosmology of a conscious, intelligent, and creative universe, with light as the creative agent that brings our universe into being. Now we move on to the fifth cosmology of scientific materialism or physicalism, which is the cosmology which dominates our culture today. The 4,000-year-long process of separation during the solar era was largely unconscious. In other words, we didn't realize what was happening. We have still not emerged from its influence or from the negative cosmology of the myth of the fall, which radically undermined the teaching of Jesus about the kingdom of heaven within us and around us. Over recent centuries, we have reached dazzling heights of scientific, medical, and technological advances, which have transformed the conditions of our lives on this planet and facilitated a phenomenal expansion of our ability to express the creative genius of our species in many different areas. But we have also suffered a catastrophic loss of soul, a loss of the ancient awareness of the sacred interweaving of all aspects of life, a loss of the sense of participation in the life of nature and the life of the cosmos. Our conscious mind, a tiny aspect of our total psyche, has become detached from the deeper matrix of the primordial soul out of which it has evolved, and has become more and more inflated. I've chosen this picture because it shows this the Cyclops really as an image of that inflation of the conscious mind. It no longer has any awareness of or relationships with the psychic depths from which it emerged. No conscious relationship with nature or the cosmos, whose staggering extent, beauty, and complexity have been revealed to us by the James Webb and Hubble telescopes. In a secular culture, the rational human mind has virtually replaced God and no longer recognizes a dimension of reality beyond the material universe, nor any form of consciousness beyond its own. There is no longer, therefore, any higher authority. This has led, with the fading of the influence of Christianity during the 18th century, to the rise of what is called scientific materialism, scientism, or physicalism, whose basic premises have been taught in our schools and universities for over 100 years, and which have now infiltrated government, academia, and the media. The whole lot are controlled by this cosmology. This cosmology, presented as incontrovertible truth, says that the universe has come into being by chance. It is described as a lifeless mechanism without consciousness, intelligence, purpose, or meaning. We humans are the only conscious elements in it. Fancy that. It dismisses the idea of God, the soul, and life beyond death. It believes our consciousness is generated by the neurons of the physical brain. So when the brain dies, consciousness ceases to exist. It is as if all earlier cosmologies have been consigned to oblivion. It's simply not interested in anything beside its own view. The feminine archetype has no place in this cosmology because all sense of relationship has been banished. This cosmology is about control and dominance. It has led to the belief that we can control the life of the planet to the sole advantage of our species, even to the splitting of the atom and the creation of our demonic weapons of mass destruction. Seeing all aspects of the world around us and the universe as devoid of consciousness and separate from ourselves has led to a catastrophic loss of soul and a loss of relationship with the planetary environment and the inner life of the cosmos. According to the psychiatrist, Dr. Ian McGilchrist, we have become prisoners of the literal left hemispheric mind, which has cut off our access to the imaginative right hemisphere and has led to this disastrous misinterpretation of reality. Now, with climate change, we are faced with the effects of the loss of our relationship with the earth and the awareness that we live within a sacred order. World leaders vie for power with each other, oblivious of the insanity of what they are doing. Our monstrous wars destroy the fabric of civilization. If there is a single idea that has facilitated the subjugation of nature, and our devastation of the planet. It is the belief that the earth has no consciousness and that we are separate from the life around us. It therefore doesn't matter what we do to matter. We have been impaled on a cosmology of separation for thousands of years. We need a metaphysical revolution that could free us from these scientific beliefs and the left hemispheric perspective that has increasingly imprisoned us. Without this revolution, which is an evolutionary imperative, we have no future as a species. So finally, I come to what I call the new cosmology, because fortunately, this metaphysical revolution is taking place. The new story coming into being is that the whole universe is a unified field. In the words of physicist Nassim Haramein, a new cosmology is being born, a new vision of our profound relationship with a conscious, intelligent, and interconnected universe. This new cosmology invites what Owen Barfield called final participation, when we are reunited with that from which we have become separated. There is an emerging consensus among certain physicists, astrophysicists, and cosmologists that consciousness, not matter, is the primary ground of reality, and that the material world exists within consciousness. Amit Goswami, in his book, The Self-Aware Universe, states unequivocally that consciousness is the ground of all being, and quantum physics makes this as clear as daylight. These scientists see the universe as a living organism, not a mechanism, with the seen and unseen aspects of it functioning as a unified whole. Our consciousness is part of an underlying ground, field, or plenum, inseparable from it, and certainly not created by the neurons of our physical brain. Each of us carries the holographic imprint of the entire universe within us. We are all equally part of the living, breathing, connecting web of life, which connects all life forms in the universe and on our planet. Following Plato, I call this web of life the soul of the cosmos. That's why I called my book The Dream of the Cosmos, A Quest for the Soul. I prefer the word soul to mind because it carries a feminine resonance, which takes me back to the lunar era. The realization that we participate in a cosmic consciousness that is the source and ground of our own consciousness could shatter the belief that material reality is all there is, and that we exist in a randomly created universe, and that there is no life beyond death. The discoveries now being made challenge what materialist science has programmed us to believe, that we as humans are separate from all other species and from the life of the planet and the universe. The astounding discoveries of quantum physics tell us that our world of matter is like a visible foam resting on a very deep ocean of light that permeates every cell of our being. We are not only connected with each other through the astonishing reach of the internet, but through the infinitesimal particles of subatomic matter. All life at this deepest level is essentially one. Each of us is an expression of the one, inseparable from it. Nor are we alone in the universe. There is emerging evidence that our planet has been repeatedly visited by inhabitants of other, more highly developed planets or galaxies. I see this emerging revelation as the fulfillment of what I call the dream of the cosmos. We are rediscovering at a new turn of the spiral of evolution what was known to shamans millennia ago in the lunar culture of the Great Mother and described in minute detail in the cosmology of Kabbalah. So, to end, we are not separate from the divinity we have been worshipping for thousands of years, but are an intrinsic part of its life, its mind, and its soul. The greatest spiritual teachers have told us that we carry divinity within our nature. Divinity is the ground of all that we call life. At the heart of the cosmos is a love of unimaginable dimensions, a love that sustains the entire universe and is the origin of our own capacity to love and to create. Before he was burnt at the stake in Rome in 1600, because he refused to deny that God was present in nature, Giordano Bruno said, "A single force, love, links and gives life to infinite worlds." So thank you for listening, Rob, and I'll stop share now. and we can have a chat. Okay.
And thank you. That is truly an astonishing adventure you just took us on. And I want to just hold up your book again so people can get a better look at it. It is truly a tour de force. It's called The Dream of the Cosmos, Quest for the Soul. And I was just mesmerized reading your work, Anne. And I'm coming back to Rumi, who said, or this is at least attributed to Rumi, when he said, each of us is not a drop in the ocean. Each of us is the ocean in a drop.
That's beautiful.
And I was trying to think of some way just to kind of pull together everything you just shared. And that's what leapt to mind. Maybe it was a Jungian synchronicity. I don't know.
Maybe that was a good leap, because it absolutely summarizes what I've been trying to say perfectly. And Rumi understood, because he had the experience of the whole. He had the vision of the whole of what we are, and he put it into his poetry.
Yes, and he did so beautifully. And I love too, Anne, that you left us with this kind of emerging paradigmatic pivot, if you will, this emerging new cosmology, which I think the gods know we could all use a little bit of hope right now. And I think
certainly need it. We need it urgently. And I was listening to Nassim Haramein a couple of nights ago, because he's moved from America to Switzerland, to the Lake of Geneva, in order to promote his whole scientific vision, really, and also to make more people aware of what he's doing. He's also working on the energy which can be extracted from the vacuum, which would free us from oil and gas and everything else, and free the atmosphere from pollution. It may take some time, and it may not be him who discovers it, but we have to move in that direction.
Yes,
so
and
I'm in touch. I did a course with him. That's why I know about him.
You did?
Him. I did a course 8 years ago, a 10-week course in this unified field science.
Yes.
So that was a new grounding for me, which put things in perspective, and I could see where we were going through what I learned with him. And I could see that this materialist philosophy is destroying our civilization. And we can see everywhere the signs of decadence, the signs of amorality, the loss of values, the loss of values, and a kind of free-for-all where each person is becoming the enemy of the other. And that is a catastrophic situation, which we have to remedy one way or the other. So you ask me anything you want, Rob, and I would love to respond.
The moments in your presentation a few moments ago, and where you called for a metaphysical revolution, which you said is an evolutionary imperative, that really resonated with me. I thought that was really beautifully done and deftly summarized. I'm wondering if you could speak to your own journey into the Jungian, because that informs so much of your perspective here. And I just wanted to read, you quote Carl Jung both in your book extensively, of course, but then in a recent essay that you have on your website, which, by the way, for our listeners and viewers, is www.annbearing.com. And it's a beautiful website and incredibly informative. You write this: the psychiatrist Carl Jung could see the dangers of this materialist philosophy. And he commented, quote, "As scientific understanding has grown, so our world has become dehumanized. Man feels himself isolated in the cosmos because he is no longer involved in nature and has lost his emotional, unconscious identity with natural phenomena. No voices now speak to man from stones, plants, and animals, nor does he speak to them, believing they can hear. His contact with nature has gone." And and of course, the promise, as you so beautifully laid out here, is the emergence of quantum understandings in challenging this
This dead
scientific,
philosophy. Yeah.
yes, the scientific reductionism.
Yeah.
Could you say a few words about Jung and the importance of Jung? Some say that Jung is sort of was a modern day shaman, and
He
maybe you
was,
could,
yes. I describe him as that in my book, actually.
you do, and I've heard others say that too. Maybe a bit about shamanism and then Jung.
Okay, well, shamanism was the method in different cultures of connecting with other dimensions of reality. And in various cultures, it had different kinds of shamans. If you're South American shamans, the ones up in the Arctic and out of Mongolia, Africa, China, everywhere there were shamans really at that early time. And they have existed. There's still shamans today. In fact, I think I'm one in a way, because I'm connecting these dimensions.
I was going to sort of suggest that, but I didn't want to be too forward in.
Don't worry. Don't worry. But anyway, with the help of psychedelic plants and drugs, yes, they were able to enter into these other dimensions. And because of that, they knew that this dimension we're in wasn't the whole picture. So they knew that they could engage with dialogue with the animals in those other dimensions. They could even speak to the animals and say, would you mind coming back so that we can kill you and use you for food, because we need to have something to sustain us. And the animals would agree to offer their lives in sacrifice. And then they would be thanked by the shaman for doing that. This happened in many different cultures. So there was a very close relationship with the animals, and a real love and appreciation of the animals, and a recognition of what they represented in sustaining our lives, so to speak. All that has gone, but it still exists in certain shamanic cultures. And also they were able to speak to other entities. I've just published a book of my mother's channeled messages just this month, called Messages from a Transcendent Dimension, which she was a kind of shaman, really, receiving these messages from Jesus and St. Francis, of all people, which told her that if humanity didn't wake up and stop killing each other, this was in the middle of the Second World War, it would be finished, and the planet might be finished with it. So these are things that I've been brought up with. I was in my teens when she received these messages, and I took them in, and I really based my whole work and my life on those messages, which have led me to be able to write The Dream of the Cosmos and other books as well. First of all, The Myth of the Goddess and other ones. So shamans, as I say, are absolutely essential, because the religions lost the direct communion with the divine. They worship the divine and they put people in touch with the divine, but they lost the direct communion and the direct speech, if you like, with the divine, which had existed in older cultures, older civilizations. And the shamans have kept it alive for us, really. And we need to rediscover it within ourselves, because we can all do this if we sit down and just talk to the other dimension. And when we die, we move into those other aspects of reality. We don't exactly know what they are. Some of us may, but I don't know. I know I've had many, many lives on this planet. Some of them I remember, some of them I don't, and just as well I don't, because it would block up what I'm doing now.
That's right. Yeah.
All the time about what did I do in the past, and am I correcting it now, sort of thing. But certainly I lived at the time of Jesus, and my mother did also. And that is where this all began, because we're now at the time of judgment after 2,000 years. And we've got to give the reckoning for what we've done. Why have we made the mess of the world? Because we didn't understand enough of why we were here and who we are and the importance of our presence on the planet. We haven't understood that.
Yes. Another hat that I wear, Anne, is that of a breath trainer, breath work trainer. And the Latin root of breath is the word spiritus, which means breath. And we look, I read your book. I was so inspired by it. What does that mean? I felt your book literally sort of breathing good energy into me. It was really remarkable, right? So we think of the words inspiring, conspiring. We breathe together the word spirit, spirits, spiritual. We are breath-filled creatures in this beautiful respiratory dance with the rest of living and breathing creation.
Right. And every breath we take, we're taking in life.
Yes.
And to go back to Jung, he said that we have to learn to listen to the spirit of the depths, what he called the spirit of the depths, and to not pay so much attention to what he called the spirit of the times, which is the media and Facebook and all that.
I love that. I hadn't. What was the
Spirit of the depth? It's
the
beautiful.
depth? Yes, yes.
And
Could you?
he spoke.
Yep.
Sorry.
No,
Go ahead.
No, please.
No, he spoke to the spirit of the depths in the red book that he wrote, the big, huge book that he wrote. And he said, I'm so sorry, I've neglected you, he said to the spirit of the depths. I've been into much of the mind, and I had completely forgotten that you exist. And he had this very moving dialogue with the spirit of the depths. And he realized that his work was to bring the spirit, as you said, to infuse the culture with the breath of the spirit as best he could. When he died, he said, I failed in my foremost task. But I don't think he did fail, because I think he's influenced many, many people. And I think his work probably in 50 years or 100 years will be better known. It's rejected now by the materialist in university teaching. They don't teach Jungian psychology. I doubt if they'd understood it. Even if they did teach it, they wouldn't know what they were talking about, because it's completely different way of looking at the world. And it's looking at the world from the inner presence of the divine presence within us that we have forgotten exists, and how to get back in touch. And that he called the process of individuation, which was really soul growth. We have to grow our souls. We can't just go on as we came into life. As we grow older and everything, we grow in maturity and in wisdom. But if we have that don't have that connection with our inner life, we lose half of life. That's what he was saying.
Yeah, so beautifully. And it's interesting, Anne, because I pay pretty close attention to the popular culture over here across the pond in the United States. And maybe it's just me, but I've heard Carl Jung and his ideas surface so much in the past several months. The most popular podcaster on the planet, Joe Rogan, talks about Jung all the time. Comedians like Jimmy Dore and Duncan Trussell, who are very have a big following here, are talking about Jung. Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who, as you know, is running for president here in the United States, although he's not getting a whole lot of coverage for reasons we'll save for later. But he was very influenced and remains very influenced by Jungian ideas and Jungian practice. And so, for whatever reason, I feel like Jung is sort of, I don't want to say he's making a comeback, but he's present. Yeah. Can you say a little something about this idea of archetypes? And because I think most people, if they know anything about Jung, they associate Jung with this idea of archetypes.
Well, archetypes, quite difficult to explain, but they are the basic structures of reality, if you like when you're building a house, they're the foundation. And they go through the history of cultures in different ways, like I've tried to explain. In one aspect, some of the feminine may be predominant, in another, the masculine may be predominant. What is needed is to bring them together, because they are the two aspects, like yin and yang. They express it beautifully in the Chinese philosophy, that you need both of them to make the whole, and one without the other isn't complete. And so there's a little bit of one in the other, in each of them, so to speak, in the yin and the yang. They have a circle in each of them of the other. So I think that this is, there are, as I say, the basic structures, but also they're the structures of the way we behave, the way man behaves to woman or woman to man, the way children are introduced into their life pattern, as it were. There's a kind of structure which comes into the birth process, the growth process, the aging process, and the dying process. These are all structured by archetypal principles or habits, really. That's what they are, habits. But age-old habits that go back thousands and thousands and thousands of years. 200,000 years was when we first became a species, as it were, on the planet. So they've been there for probably 200,000 years, working away in the background. It's very complicated to explain the whole, but I've just given a brief in a nutshell.
That was beautifully described. Well, as we ponder sort of Team Human's future, and maybe this is a good sort of closing question for you, Anne, because you have lived, am I right in saying
91 years?
Well, That's incredible. Congratulations. I would never know. Can you offer us as Team Human some advice for how we might approach integrating mind and matter, spirit and nature? How do we kind of transcend these dualisms that you so articulately lay out in your...
Well, I think the most important thing is to realize how they came into being, which I've tried to explain in that book and in my talk. If we know the pattern of what happened in the past, we can have a guide, as it were, to what we need to do in the present and the future. But if we have no knowledge of the past, which is the case mostly of, say, university students, they have no knowledge of where they've come from, what they're doing here, no context in which to view their whole trajectory of their life or lives on the planet. So I think that we need to have the whole picture. We need to know the wider context. And then we need to know that it's important that we're here on this planet for a reason. We're not just planted here like a drop of seeds or something to grow, but we have an absolute... The universe had a purpose in putting us here and in having this whole process of evolution developing through these 200,000 years. So it's been watched over by higher elements in the cosmos, this process. That's what's happening on the planet. And what the messages of my mother said was that they want this planet to complete its evolution and join the other planets who have already completed their evolution. So there's a plan for this planet, and we are part of it. And it's important for humans to know that. And then look around at the culture, look at the mess, look at the cruelty, look at the anger, look at the despair, look at the suffering, and begin to work on any of those and see, where can I help? What can I do? What could I contribute that might make some difference? It may be just in your household or in your small community, maybe the local school, which has been taken over by these ridiculous ideas of gender, that need to be got rid of as fast as possible, because they are what has filled the gap where religion has gone. If you take away God, the image of God, you're left with an abyss or a vacuum. And into that vacuum comes any ideology that can hold its own and says, this is what you have to believe now. This is what we need. And people believe it because they're like sheep. They don't understand. They're being conditioned to obey. That's another archetype.
Yes, Nietzsche warned us of this 150 years ago when he spoke of the death of God. And it's a much misunderstood phrase, but he said, you're going to end up with one of two phenomena. One is nihilism of various sorts. The other is totalitarianism of various sorts. Isms rush in to fill the void. And I'm glad
we've seen totalitarianism raise its ugly head during COVID and the lockdown, and we can see how easily people are conditioned also to demonize anybody who is different. That's a pattern that goes with totalitarianism and with an approach of having a false deity, which is the government, in place of the real deity. So there's a lot to sort out, and a lot that needs to people become conscious of, and quickly, because there's not much time. Because totalitarianism is gaining strength through the big international corporations like the WHO or the WEF. Both of them are associations that you need to watch carefully and not fall into the trap of obeying things that you're told to do.
I'm so glad that you said that, Anne. Yeah, I refer to this as kind of the globalist impulse, if you will, another sort of ism. And we wanted the idea is to sort of make everyone conform, right? And
it's to have power over people, absolute power. And if you remember, Jesus said in many of the Gospels, he said, Caesar, this world, is the power principle. He didn't say it in those words, but he said, the ruler of this world, he called it, or he called it Caesar. And it's that we have to overcome. We have to overcome the power principle. And that goes, every one of this who is listening to this talk eventually, see where the power principle is active in your life, what you are obeying without being aware of it, perhaps, what values you're absorbing without knowing what values they are. And where are your own values, your heart values.
Yes, you remember the famed story from the Gospels, the four that were included in, after Nicaea. when the passersby ask Jesus, should we pay taxes to Caesar? And by way of answer, Jesus, grabs a fish out of the river and opens its mouth, and there's the 2 drachma coin. And Jesus famously says, render unto Caesar what is Caesar's, and render unto God what is God's.
And this is what we have done.
Yeah, exactly. And reading your book now, that resonates for me in a whole different way. Well, I want to end, Anne, with just one more snippet from your own words here. Again, this is this beautiful essay at your AnneBering.com website, offering us sort of the quantum hope for Team Human, if you will. You write this: the new story emerging in quantum physics tells us that the whole universe is a unified field. Our lives are part of a cosmic web of life which connects all life forms in the universe and on our planet. Every atom of life interacts with every other atom, no matter how distant. We are not only connected through the internet, but through the infinitesimal particles of subatomic matter. We are part of, I love this phrase, an infinitude of consciousness, which sustains not only our world, but the entire universe. This restores the original cosmology of the Great Mother at a new level of understanding.
Thank you for reading that.
Well, thank you so much, Anne, for your work. This is really your life's work. I think you are a shaman, if I may say so. Do you have any last words of wisdom for our audience?
Don't lose hope. Don't despair, but focus on the small things that give you happiness and that make your heart rejoice, and follow that thread, because that's more important than anything else. Yeah.
Well, Anne Bering, thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Rob, for inviting me. It's been a very great pleasure.
Indeed. We believe here at the Great Relearning that conversation is contagious. So like courage. So good luck over the pond, and I hope that we'll have a chance to meet face to face someday. But in the meantime, keep doing what you're doing.
Thank you. Okay, I'll say goodbye now.
Thank you, Anne. Bye-bye. Welcome, everybody, to the Great Relearning Room. We are here with Ian and Philip and Michael Baldwin, reflecting on Anne Bering's book, The Dream of the Cosmos. Gentlemen, welcome. Who'd like to start us off? So much to ponder.
We agreed to be spontaneous, so I'm not in the mood to start us off.
Yeah, it's a magisterial book.
Well, I can kick off a little bit with, I think one of the things that I find very challenging in this brilliant interview and fantastic book is the, obviously the whole mind versus matter. And what I find hard to understand is that, I mean, what does she say? 20,000 BC to 2000 BC, then 2000 BC to 2000 AD, this enormous shift out of the Great Mother into the Great Father, and the birth of the monotheistic religions. And then the sort of the 500 years of matter dominated because of reductionism, material, or scientism, whatever you want to call it. The thing that I find challenging is to try to get back into an understanding viscerally of what did it mean to really, even though it's got words galore, what did it mean really to be in those, steeped in those years of a Great Mother mind, idealism, dominance? And I think it's really hard to grasp, because I have a feeling we're so brainwashed by scientism that getting back into that instinctual feeling mode is tough. It's tough. And the only other thing I would say is I find it so interesting how these thinkers like Anne and others we have done and are doing, boy, they hold out hope. And they really sort of believe that, in a funny way, perhaps I'm reading into this, that this sort of what we three, I think, believe is devolution is almost like preordained. And we hit the gutter, I think, according to Anne, in the 60s, 1960s. And now there's going to be, I don't know, revolution, renaissance, a new fabulous stage coming. Anyway, that's just, why don't the other two comment or say something about any of that? Or go anywhere you want.
Yeah. Well, I agree. It's daunting because when you read books and you reflect on them, you're up here, and so you can have genuine intellectual insights, but to get them here, and above all here, speaking of the three brains, the triune brain, it's very tough. And she has the lunar great goddess times go for, I think, tens of thousands of years, but at any rate, she might, others and she might not say that, but at least close to 20. And then we shift to the solar
right
deity. And so already that's a huge shift, but that's long behind us. If I get her chronology right, we're now in, I think, the fourth or fifth stage of scientism. Anyway, it's complicated and it's difficult to access.
It's certainly especially difficult when you're sitting in a chair and reading about it. I think it's like, okay, that's the first stage of learning, maybe, but you're only going to get it when you're in situ, whatever that may mean, whether you're gardening or if you're thinking about something else altogether. That's when these things come to you. That's when you have these visceral experiences. So, of course, everything we're doing, this whole podcast, these are all highly intellectual and not experiential by nature. But on the other hand, in the many different ways that I think all of the people we invite to speak on these podcasts, they will be coming at the same subject from various and sundry and different angles. But all of them taken in the round will, I think, help us not only understand what's going on, but increase the possibility of experiencing beyond what we normally experience now. I realize that's very vaguely expressed, but for example, she makes reference to life and death together being a whole in the process of regeneration. Well, that's quite a mouthful of words, and they're only words. They only are meaningful in some sense when you experience these things. Anyway, that's just a comment on what he had said. The other thing that is amazing, I was blown away by her reference to the first stage. I forget the title of the name of the first stage, but it was 25,000 BCE up to 1000 BC. And later on in her discussion, she makes reference to us being as we are and already plugging into these things as far back as 200,000 years ago. Well, if we go 200,000 years ago to 1000 BC, we're in a little dot of time at the end of that trajectory.
Yeah.
Thanks, Philip. Yeah.
Well, I wrote down several little things, and it seems to me we do keep coming back to a consistent theme, which is the presence of the spiritual in the material world, or not. And that keeps recurring in our discussions, and will continue to do so as long as we have these podcasts. And Anne, I think, was very eloquent in addressing that issue.
Right.
I thought she was very eloquent, full stop. You realize that I mean, I'm 76, she's 91, and she looks younger than me. Her brain's working a lot better too.
Yeah. Yeah.
I wanted to do a whole separate podcast with Anne just about her like health and wellness protocols.
Yeah.
Really, really remarkable.
But this question of spirit, Philip, that's where my mind and maybe my spirit too seem to wander.
Well, and she doesn't just stay with, shall we say, the more esoteric approach to this subject. At the end of your interview with her, she went right into contemporary affairs, globalism, and the control multinationals have their boot on our necks, and a lot of contemporary stuff, which is also all woven up in the predicament of our age of scientism.
Yeah.
The patriarchal thing, somewhere in it may have been, I'm groping for an email exchange she had with Michael. Have I lost that already? Oh, here it is. And this may be worth reading. So she writes Michael on August 17th, just passed 2 weeks ago. I think one of the reasons we're in such a stultifying, blind and deaf culture is because the religions have been focused entirely on belief rather than transformation and self-discovery. I recently did a talk showing how Hinduism, Buddhism, Taoism, and Christianity have the same essential message, but the message has not gotten through because religions have concealed it. The essential message is that we are all part of the divinity of the entire cosmos. We all carry divinity within us, but aren't aware of it because we've been taught to worship a creator as something separate from ourselves.
That's good.
Yeah, we don't see the world and everything in it as divine because we've been taught God is way beyond us. I don't think that's fair of some of the other religions, but in Christianity,
that's true. That's true.
Christianity, in a distant heaven, we succumb to the temptation of power to compensate for the ignorance of who we are and why we're here. So I just read this again, Michael, and it's
very good.
Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah, and of course, one of the things, again, with this sort of brainwashing, I guess, that we've had in life about something like the fall is, and where I think she's so effective in the way she writes and sometimes, repeats in different words. But honestly, the misinterpretation of the fall, to me, is just a doozer. And then, that kicks off this horrible, misogynist, horrendous treatment of women, and to be blamed for sin and everything, evil. And then to cap it off, I was totally unaware of St. Augustine and this revered figure in the church who, you know, has this marvelous 14-year relationship with the mistress that he's devoted to, has a child by a son, is told by his mother he has to have a proper marriage, which he enters into, gets rid of the mistress. Obviously, the marriage isn't any real good. Follows with a second mistress, who he then, because he's had this some sort of epiphany about the horrors of being engaged with the female sex, gets rid of the second mistress, and by the end of his life, won't even allow his sister and niece or any female to come into his presence, because the face of the female is so disgustingly reminiscent of the creation of the evil that was generated by that interpretation of the fall. And you sort of go, oh my God, how could we be? And of course, people like Pelagius and Justin try desperately to put across their point of view, diametrically opposed to his, didn't carry. And that was the beginning of the horror show with respect to the way in which the world has treated women ever since. And everybody bought into it.
No, the Augustine story, which is not in the interview, it's in the book.
Yeah, sorry, right.
Yeah.
It's a gagger.
It's a gagger.
It's a gagger.
And Augustine is the most, after St. Paul, who invented Christianity,
right?
Augustine is by far the most powerful influence in the religion.
Yeah.
And so that happened in the 4th century.
Yeah.
AD. Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. Very vivid, what you just recited.
And quickly, I was struck too in Anne's work about how she presents potential parallel pathways that Team Human, let's say, the roads we did not go down because of these kinds of decisions that were made. You know, she talks about how Christianity early on had an opportunity to kind of embody the feminine as well as the masculine.
Well, she makes a point of the way I think Elaine Pagels does. She makes you aware that in the 1st century after Christ's death, there's a very different movement and understanding and practice going on. And I remember Pagels describes this also, where women are part of the ministry.
Yeah.
So the actual process by which that gets literally overturned, I'm not a church historian, so she doesn't go into the process of how it happens, but she makes you very aware that Christianity was about what Christ preached and practiced. And somewhere the theme got lost. It didn't start with Augustine. Augustine is the culmination.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Well, like everything we're talking about is a series of a great many dominoes, one falling after the other. So I think until Constantine laid down the law, it was actually his successor, I think, who really made it law. But until Constantine went, aha, and realized that about 1/10 of the population was turning Christian, it was pretty much a free for all, and there were many different sects, and there were also a great deal of religious tolerance. And it was only when the state took the religion aboard that the story really headed down the road that we all know.
Council of Nicaea, also in the 4th century, but early. You know, it all, Plato's Academy wasn't done in until Justinian. And what was that, 490? Was it actually, I think it was the end of the 4th century. So everything changed by the end of the 4th century.
Yeah, it was a confluence of events of dramatic nature. Yeah.
But she doesn't leave it there. Again, in her book, you get she covers the Islam located in Spain, and that gives birth to the troubadours. I don't know that it gives birth to the Cathars, but it gives birth to a general spirit, a zeitgeist that gives rise to a different kind of Christianity, actually. Yeah. In the 12th and 13th centuries. Maybe we're getting too far off here, but I'm just saying there's an evolution. Earlier, Michael, you pointed out, I think this tension of we're evolving, and all three of us really carry the word and the feeling of devolving. Mm-hmm. But everyone we're reading, it speaks in this grand scale of an evolving. And I myself don't understand the mystery of it, so I won't say anything.
No, I don't either, at least not yet. Are we running out of time, Rob? Are we running out of time?
Yeah, I was going to say, let's maybe bring this to a close for now.
Well, I was going to suggest, I love this paragraph that she wrote in the preface of her book. So, what is the story of the soul? Why was it lost, and why is its recovery so vitally important to us now? Over the course of many centuries, we have developed a formidable intellect, a formidable science, a formidable technology. But what of the soul, source of our deepest instincts and feelings? What of our need for relationship with this unrecognized dimension of reality? What of our visions, dreams, and hopes, as well as our unhealed wounds and the suffering generated by our lack of compassion towards each other? The pressing need for the soul's recognition has brought us to this time of choice. It is as if mortal danger is forcing us to take a great leap in our evolution that we might never have made were we not driven to it, to take it by force of circumstances that we ourselves have created. The creative genius of our species is being called upon as never before to respond to the great challenges of our time.
Good. Good.
Beautiful.
I think
the
that
winner.
Yeah.
Beautifully said. Well, maybe we'll button it up there. So thank you, gentlemen. We've heard from Jeremy Lent now and Anne Baring, and I believe our next guest a few weeks down the road will be Mark Booth and his book, The Secret History of the World. So we'll leave it here for now. Thanks to all of our listeners, our watchers. Thanks again to the Marian Institute, and certainly to the Baldwin brothers, Michael and Ian and Philip, for making this all possible. And gentlemen, we will see you in the next episode of Great Relearning.
Good.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.